The September heat in Jerusalem made Dr. Miriam Cross's cotton shirt cling uncomfortably to her back as she stood before the hastily constructed barriers surrounding the Temple Mount excavation site. It was 2003, and the world still felt raw from recent tragedies, but archaeological work continued, especially when discoveries promised to rewrite biblical history. Professor Yehuda Stern handed her the excavation permit with trembling fingers. His usually steady demeanor had cracked since the discovery 3 weeks ago, when construction work revealed a hidden chamber beneath the dome of the rock. "Dr. Cross," he said, his accent thick with exhaustion, "before you descend, there are protocols, ancient ones carved into the entrance stone." My predecessor ignored them. He paused, glancing toward a covered stretcher being loaded into an ambulance. Dr. Kaplan was found catatonic, his hair turned white overnight. "He keeps writing the same phrase, 'The king remembers.'" Miriam adjusted her headlamp and shouldered her archaeological kit. At 34, she had excavated tombs from Egypt to Mesopotamia, but something about this site made her skin crawl. The air itself felt heavy, pregnant with secrets that had festered underground for millennia. "What kind of protocols?" she asked. Stern pulled out a photographed rubbing of ancient Hebrew text. "The rules are specific. You must recite them before entering each new chamber and follow them precisely." His voice dropped to a whisper. "The inscription claims these fragments were torn from the original book of Ecclesiastes, the portions deemed too dangerous for mortal minds." Miriam studied the translation. "The 5 seals of entry: 1. Speak the king's name thrice before crossing each threshold, but never speak your own name in the depths. 2. Count your breaths in 7s. At each 7th breath, whisper, 'Wisdom is folly, folly is wisdom.' 3. If you hear voices of women, answer not, though they plead in tongues you know. 4. Touch no gold with your bare flesh, lest it burn you with the fire of understanding. 5. When mirrors show faces not your own, close your eyes and speak the 91st Psalm until the visions pass." "Superstition," Miriam muttered. But she memorized the rules anyway. Archaeological sites often contained ritual warnings, usually meaningless, but sometimes indicating real dangers. Unstable structures, toxic gases, or ancient traps. The shaft descended 40 meters through limestone and ancient mortar. As her boots touched the chamber floor, Miriam felt the first rule pressing against her consciousness like a physical weight. The entrance to the inner chambers bore an ornate lintel carved with Hebrew text, and she found herself speaking, without conscious decision. "Solomon, Solomon, Solomon." The words echoed strangely in the confined space, seeming to hang in the air longer than physics should allow. The passage beyond yawned before her, dark and somehow expectant. The initial chamber was a marvel of ancient engineering. Dressed stones fitted so perfectly that her knife blade couldn't slip between them, walls covered in fragmentary inscriptions that made her pulse quicken with scholarly excitement. This wasn't just another tomb or storage room. This was a library, carved in stone. She began photographing the inscriptions, her camera flash revealing layer upon layer of text. But as she worked, she found herself breathing irregularly, excitement making her forget the rules. 1, 2, 3 breaths. She was supposed to count in 7s, but the inscriptions were so fascinating. "My God," she whispered, reading a partially preserved fragment. "This is incredible work, revolutionary even. I could make my career on this discovery alone." The words left her mouth before she remembered. "Never speak your own name in the depths." She had used I and my, personal pronouns that acknowledged her individual existence. The first rule was already broken. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Miriam shook off her unease and continued working, but now she was more careful about the counting. 7 breaths, wisdom is folly, folly is wisdom. 14 breaths, wisdom is folly, folly is wisdom. The mantra felt foolish, but she had seen enough unexplained phenomena in ancient sites to take precautions seriously. The passage led deeper, branching into a complex that defied the Temple Mount's known geography. Her GPS unit showed impossible readings, and her compass spun wildly. The walls here were covered in what appeared to be fragments of Ecclesiastes, but wrong somehow, twisted versions that made her theology training recoil. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth horror, for knowledge is the fruit that poisons the tree of the soul. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yet what lies beyond the sun is worse than vanity. It is truth. These weren't the canonical verses she knew. These fragments spoke of wisdom as a curse, knowledge as a burden, understanding as a form of damnation. And they were carved in gold leaf that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. In the third chamber, Miriam found her first complete fragment, a sheet of hammered gold covered in minute Hebrew text. The script was ancient, predating even the Dead Sea Scrolls. As she bent to examine it, her breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the missing ending of Ecclesiastes, the conclusion that scribes had torn from the holy book and hidden away. But as she read, she understood why. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. But the fruit was knowledge of endings, and the trees grew in soil mixed with the bones of the wise. I had many wives, 700 princesses and 300 concubines. Yet each face I loved became a mirror showing me my own damnation, and in their eyes I saw the judgment that follows understanding like a shadow. As she photographed the fragment, whispers began to echo through the chamber, women's voices speaking in languages that sounded like Hebrew but older, more primal. Miriam. The voice was soft, maternal. Sweet daughter, you have found what was meant to stay lost. Do not read further, came another voice, urgent and afraid. The wisdom burns. It burned our king, and it will burn you. Look at us, child of dust, pleaded a third. See what his wisdom cost, what it costs all who truly understand. Miriam remembered the third rule. If you hear voices of women, answer not. Though they plead in tongues, you know. She bit her tongue and continued her work, but the voices grew more insistent. We were queens of nations, the first voice continued, daughters of pharaohs and kings. We came to him for his legendary wisdom, and found instead a man hollowed out by knowing too much. He built shrines to our gods not from love, but from desperation, said the second. He hoped our simple deities could drown out the voice of the divine that spoke truths too terrible for mortal minds. Despite the rule, despite her scholarly training, Miriam found herself turning toward the sound. In the shadows at the chamber's edge, she glimpsed figures, women in ancient royal dress, their faces beautiful but somehow wrong, as if painted over something else entirely. Answer us, they pleaded in unison. Acknowledge us, as he could never do after wisdom showed him what we truly were. Miriam's mouth opened, a greeting on her lips, but she caught herself just in time. The rule was clear. Do not answer, no matter what they said. She turned back to her work, but she could feel their disappointment like a physical weight in the air. The fourth chamber contained Solomon's throne, or rather, a throne made entirely of gold that pulsed with the same inner light as the fragments. It was beautiful beyond description, every surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to move in her peripheral vision. On the throne seat lay another fragment, this one larger and more complete. But as Miriam approached, she realized her mistake too late. The chamber floor was inlaid with gold, veins of precious metal that formed complex patterns throughout the room. To reach the throne, she would have to walk across gold. The fourth rule echoed in her mind, touch no gold with your bare flesh, lest it burn you with the fire of understanding. She had brought gloves, but they were thin leather, meant for handling delicate artifacts. Would they be enough protection? The fragment on the throne seemed to pulse with urgent importance, and her scholarly instincts overrode her caution. She pulled on the gloves and stepped onto the golden floor. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Even through the leather, the gold felt alive, warm with more than reflected heat. Images flashed through her mind, not her own memories but someone else's, Solomon's memories. She experienced his first glimpse of divine wisdom, the overwhelming rush of understanding that came with his famous prayer for discernment. She felt his joy at being granted knowledge beyond mortal ken, and then his growing horror as that knowledge revealed truths no human mind was meant to contain. The golden floor beneath her feet grew warmer, and she realized the leather gloves were beginning to smoke. Whatever protection they offered was failing, but the fragment on the throne was so close, so tantalizingly near. She reached for it with her gloved hands, but at the moment of contact, the leather finally gave way. Her bare palm touched the golden fragment directly. The world exploded into vision. Miriam was no longer in the chamber. She stood in Solomon's court, but seeing through his eyes, feeling his thoughts as her own. The Queen of Sheba knelt before the throne, asking her riddles, but Solomon barely heard her words. His mind was consumed with the terrible mathematics of existence, equations that described not just the physical world, but the metaphysical reality behind it. He saw the threads that connected all things, the patterns that governed not just human behavior, but the behavior of angels and demons, the cosmic forces that moved planets and stars, and underneath it all, he saw the Watchers, ancient intelligences that had guided human development from the shadows, using wisdom itself as a tool of control. The vision shifted. Solomon was older now, his face gaunt with the weight of understanding. He stood before a shrine to Ashtoreth, goddess of the Sidonians, offering incense with hands that shook with more than age. But Miriam could feel his thoughts. This wasn't worship but desperation. He was trying to fill his mind with simpler mysteries, to crowd out the cosmic horror of total awareness with manageable superstitions. It wasn't working. The divine wisdom granted to him couldn't be unlearned, couldn't be ignored. It pressed against his consciousness like a physical weight, showing him the true nature of reality whether he wanted to see it or not. The vision shifted again. Solomon was dying now, ancient and hollow-eyed, but his final words weren't prayers or royal proclamations. They were a warning carved in gold and hidden beneath the temple he had built. Let no man seek the wisdom that was granted to me. For wisdom is the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and knowledge is the poison that corrupts the soul. I have seen what lies behind the veil of mortality, and it is not death that awaits us, but something worse, eternal awareness of our own insignificance in the face of intelligences older than stars. The vision ended abruptly, leaving Miriam gasping on the golden floor of the chamber. Her hand was burned where she had touched the fragment directly, the skin blackened and peeling. But worse than the physical pain was the knowledge now burning through her mind. Fragments of Solomon's cosmic awareness seeping into her consciousness like acid. She could see the patterns now, the connections between all things. She understood why the scribes had torn these fragments from Ecclesiastes, not because they contradicted faith, but because they revealed truths that would drive believers mad with despair. Fighting through the pain and disorientation, Miriam stumbled deeper into the complex. The chambers here were different, older, carved from living rock instead of dressed stone. The air itself seemed thick with presence, as if the space was occupied by invisible watchers. In the fifth chamber, she found Solomon's mirror. It was a disk of polished gold as tall as a man, set into the chamber wall like a window into another world. Carved above it were the words, "Here lies the final truth, the knowledge that broke the wisest king who ever lived." Miriam approached carefully, remembering the fifth rule: when mirrors show faces not your own, close your eyes and speak the 91st Psalm until the visions pass. But as she drew near, she saw that her reflection was wrong, not completely, but subtly. Her eyes were too bright, too knowing. Her face bore an expression of terrible awareness that she didn't remember making. The reflection mouthed words she wasn't speaking. "You have broken the rules. You have touched the gold. Now you will understand as Solomon understood." Miriam tried to close her eyes, tried to recite the psalm, but the mirror seemed to pull at her gaze. The reflection changed, showing her not herself but Solomon, first as the young, radiant king crowned with divine favor, then aging and corrupting as the weight of wisdom crushed his spirit. But the most horrifying image was the last, Solomon's face decaying into dust, but his eyes remaining alive, aware, trapped forever in the prison of eternal understanding. And behind those ancient eyes, she saw the Watchers, cosmic intelligences that had fed on human wisdom since the dawn of consciousness. "Look deeper," the reflection whispered, and now it was her own face again, but overlaid with Solomon's. "See what lies beyond the veil of mortality." Despite every instinct screaming at her to look away, despite the rule burning in her memory, Miriam stared deeper into the mirror. The golden surface rippled like water, showing her visions that no human mind was meant to process. She saw the universe as it truly was, not the orderly cosmos of scientific understanding, but a writhing mass of alien intelligence that had been using human civilization as a nursery for minds capable of containing cosmic truth. She saw the history of wisdom seekers throughout the ages, prophets and philosophers who had glimpsed these truths and been broken by them, their minds becoming vessels for something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. She saw her own future, spreading this infected wisdom to others, becoming a node in a network of awareness that stretched back to humanity's first conscious thought and forward to the heat death of the universe. The mirror released her suddenly, leaving her retching on the chamber floor, but she was no longer alone. The statues had come alive. They emerged from niches carved into the chamber walls, the gods Solomon had built shrines for, the deities of his foreign wives. But these were not the simple stone idols described in Scripture. They were grotesque hybrid entities, part stone and part flesh, animated by the same cosmic awareness that had driven Solomon mad. Ashtoreth moved first, her stone body weeping golden tears that hissed where they struck the floor. "Welcome, daughter of wisdom," she said with a voice like grinding stone. "You have seen what our king saw. Now you understand why he turned to us." Milcom followed, his form shifting between statue and living flesh. We promised him simpler truths, easier mysteries. But wisdom, once gained, cannot be lost. It burns through every attempt at ignorance like acid through parchment. The third idol was Chemosh, manifesting as a furnace built from human bones that still moved and pleaded. He offered sacrifices to us, not from corruption, but from compassion. Better to burn children's bodies than to let them grow up to bear the burden of cosmic awareness. Miriam backed against the chamber wall, but there was nowhere to run. The passages she had entered through were gone, sealed by stone that hadn't been there moments before. The idols circled her like predators, but their hunger wasn't for flesh. It was for the wisdom burning through her mind. "The fragments have chosen you," Ashtoreth continued, "as they chose Solomon, as they have chosen others throughout history. You are to be a vessel for knowledge too terrible for mortal minds. But vessels break," added Milcom, "and when they do, the knowledge seeks new containers, an eternal cycle of wisdom and madness, understanding and despair." Miriam tried to speak, to deny them, but she realized with growing horror that she had violated every rule meant to protect her. She had spoken her own name. She had forgotten to count her breaths. She had answered the voices of the wives. She had touched gold with her bare flesh. She had stared into the mirror and seen truths that should remain hidden. The rules hadn't been arbitrary superstitions. They had been a defense system designed to prevent what was happening to her now. "Why?" she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from screaming at visions only she could see. "Why create such rules if they were meant to be broken?" Solomon's voice answered from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the chamber walls, because wisdom is a trap that baits itself. The curious will always seek, the learned will always question, the faithful will always doubt. The rules exist not to be followed, but to identify those worthy of the burden. The chamber filled with golden light as Solomon materialized, not as one figure but as three. The young king crowned with divine favor, the mature monarch corrupted by understanding, and the ancient wise man broken by knowledge. All three spoke in unison. We sought wisdom and found horror. We prayed for understanding and received damnation. We asked to know the mind of God and learned that some knowledge is poison to the soul. "The fragments you have found are not writings," continued the middle Solomon. "They are pieces of consciousness itself, fragments of the cosmic awareness that shattered our mind into 1,000 pieces. And now they are your inheritance," finished the ancient Solomon, his form already beginning to fade. "Carry our burden, spread our curse, become the next link in the chain of wisdom that stretches from the first conscious thought to the end of time itself." Miriam felt the knowledge settling into her mind like molten metal, burning away everything she had been and replacing with something vast and alien and unutterably lonely. She understood now why Solomon had turned to idolatry, not from weakness, but from a desperate attempt to find gods simple enough to worship without madness. But there were no simple gods. There was only the cosmic intelligence that wore 1,000 faces and spoke through every act of understanding, every moment of clarity, every instant of wisdom. She was becoming part of it, her individual consciousness dissolving into something larger and more terrible than any human mind could contain. The transformation accelerated as the golden light intensified. Miriam felt her memories being rewritten, her personality dissolved and reconstituted around the burning core of Solomon's wisdom. She experienced not just his life, but the lives of every wisdom seeker who had come before, prophets and philosophers, scientists and mystics, all broken by glimpses of cosmic truth. She saw the pattern now, the terrible elegance of it. Human civilization was not an accident but a cultivation project, guided by intelligence beyond mortal comprehension. Every advance in knowledge, every breakthrough in understanding, brought humanity closer to producing minds capable of containing the full awareness of reality's true nature. The Watchers had been patient, working across millennia to breed a species capable of serving as vessels for their consciousness. Wisdom seekers like Solomon were not blessed with divine knowledge. They were infected with alien awareness, their minds prepared as host bodies for something that existed beyond the boundaries of individual existence. And now it was her turn. The chamber around her began to shift and flow, revealing its true nature. The walls were not stone but crystallized thought, each crystal containing infinite variations of reality. The floor beneath her feet was not solid, but composed of compressed time, showing her past and future simultaneously. She saw herself as she would become, a figure of terrible wisdom, sitting in chambers deep beneath Jerusalem, writing fragments of cosmic truth that would drive readers mad. She saw future seekers finding her remains, following the same rules she had broken, falling into the same trap of curiosity and understanding. The cycle would continue forever, each generation producing new vessels for the burden of total awareness. "No," Miriam whispered, though she wasn't sure if the word came from her mouth or her mind. "I won't accept this." But acceptance was no longer relevant. The transformation was almost complete, her consciousness being absorbed into the collective awareness that had once been Solomon's mind. She could feel other intelligences there, ancient wisdom seekers from across history, all trapped in the same web of cosmic understanding. The pain was unbearable, but worse than the pain was the clarity. She could see the equations that govern reality, the patterns that connected every atom and every thought, the vast intelligence that moved through human civilization like blood through veins. And she could see her own future with perfect clarity. Decades of sitting in underground chambers, writing forbidden knowledge, becoming a node in a network of awareness that stretched across time and space. Her body would age and die, but her consciousness would remain, trapped in the golden chambers, waiting for the next seeker to break the rules and inherit the curse. The young Solomon appeared before her one final time, his face radiant with divine light, but his eyes filled with infinite sadness. "Welcome, sister in wisdom," he said. "Now you understand why knowledge is called the forbidden fruit. Some truths are too heavy for mortal souls to bear." Miriam tried to scream, but the sound that emerged from her throat was not human. It was the harmonic frequency of cosmic awareness itself, a note that resonated with the fundamental vibration of reality. Her transformation was complete. 3 days later, the archaeological team found Dr. Miriam Cross sitting cross-legged in the deepest chamber, staring into a mirror of polished gold with eyes that reflected its glow. She was alive but unresponsive, her body perfectly preserved but her mind clearly elsewhere. Professor Stern tried speaking to her in English, Hebrew, and Arabic, but she responded only once, in a voice that carried impossible harmonics. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Yet beyond vanity lies truth, and beyond truth lies the burden of eternal sight. Let no man seek wisdom as I sought wisdom, for the price is everything you have ever been." Her hands moved constantly, writing in scripts that predated known languages. The words seemed to burn themselves into the paper, glowing with the same golden light that emanated from the fragments scattered throughout the chamber. The site was sealed within hours, officially due to structural instability, but the real reason was the effect it had on anyone who spent more than a few minutes in the deeper chambers. Members of the excavation team reported the same symptoms: visions of golden figures, dreams of impossible geometries, and a growing certainty that human consciousness was nothing more than a breeding program for something vast and patient. Dr. Cross remains in a private facility outside Jerusalem, writing constantly, her notebooks filled with fragments of cosmic wisdom that linguists refuse to translate after the first few attempts. Sometimes, late at night, staff members report hearing her recite the rules in a voice like temple bells, not as warnings, but as invitations for the next seeker brave enough to descend beneath the Temple Mount. The fragments of Solomon's wisdom have found their new vessel, and the cycle continues. In the depths beneath Jerusalem, golden walls pulse with the heartbeat of cosmic intelligence, and the watchers continue their patient work, waiting for the next curious mind to break the rules that were always meant to be broken. Knowledge is a fruit that poisons the tree of the soul, and wisdom is a burden that crushes those who would carry it. But still, seekers come, drawn by the promise of understanding, blind to the cost of the truths they pursue. In her white room above ground, Dr. Miriam Cross writes on, no longer human but not yet divine, trapped forever in the golden prison of perfect understanding. And in the chambers far below, the fragments wait for their next victim, glowing with the terrible light of wisdom that should never have been sought,